Protein and healthy fats are essential and were wrongly discouraged in prior dietary guidelines. We are ending the war on saturated fats.
Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm Jessica Wilson, dietitian and author of It's Always Been Ours. This is an independent podcast brought to you by people who don't yet cook with beef tallow. You can find me on Instagram at jessicawilson.msrd. You can watch the show on YouTube. You can email the pod at makingitawkwardpod@gmail.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can join the Patreon for as little as $3 a month to help keep it sustainable. And you can buy podcast merch like this sweatshirt that says, I came, I saw, I made it awkward. Now, RFK Jr. has told us that, quote, we are ending the war on saturated fats with the release of his new food triangle and accompanying dietary guidelines. He has told us over and over that saturated fats are actually healthy for us. But is that true? Consumers are confused. To find out, I asked Dr. Selina Wang to come back to the show to discuss the healthy fat recommendations of the food triangle. She first joined us in late 2024 to discuss the hysteria about seed oils that was a cornerstone of the MAHA movement. Dr. Selina Wang is faculty director at the UC Davis Olive Center now. She is also the professor of cooperative extension in small-scale fruit and vegetable processing and vice chair of the Department of Food Science and Technology at UC Davis. Now, olive oil got its own clip art image on the triangle, and I was immediately happy for her. We discussed that even though RFK Jr. says that he is ending the war, the percentage of our calories that should supposedly come from saturated fat on the triangle remains the same as in previous dietary guidelines. His triangle states that healthy fats are plentiful in many whole foods such as meats, poultry, eggs, omega-3 rich seafood, nuts, seeds, full-fat dairy, olives, and avocado. He tells us that when cooking with or adding fats to meals, prioritize oils with essential fatty acid, such as olive oil. Other options can include butter or beef tallow. In general, saturated fat consumption should not exceed 10% of total daily calories. Significantly limiting highly processed foods will help meet this goal. Limiting highly processed foods, huh? Let's get a little perspective on what this would look like in an RFK-approved diet. For context, just using a 2,000 calorie diet, 10% of calories from saturated fat would look like 5 cups of whole milk. That's it for your saturated fat, no more. Or 3 tablespoons of butter. Again, that's all you get. Or 3.7 tablespoons of beef tallow. And then 1 T-bone steak, a prominent clip art image on the food triangle, has 3.7 times the amount of total saturated fat the current dietary guidelines recommend us eating. So a lot of meat and a lot of milk would far exceed that 10% goal. Today, Selina helps us understand what healthy fats actually are and also gives us a great overview of olive oil processing and has advice for us when choosing which oils to cook with. Dr. Selina Wang, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you about healthy fats. When I reached out to you, I was putting healthy fats in quotation marks because I don't know if any of us, including me, know what healthy fats are supposed to be after this inverted pyramid. I'm wondering if you have or can share your initial thoughts after seeing the triangle.
Yeah, I think we know what fats are. I'm not sure if we know why healthy is. I think fats, there's a definition for that. Yeah, so I think I saw a bottle of olive oil. I like that. I think most people recognize olive oil, which is high in healthy fats, the oleic one of the healthy fats, right? Oleic acid. And I was really glad to see that. And I started reading, and I think you say something about essential fatty acids and then olive oil next to each other, which scientifically speaking, not quite right.
Right.
So I think the takeaway is there's some good stuff, and then there's some stuff that is contradictory maybe or confusing. So that would be but I'm not an expert in all of these things. So for fat, because there's also the animal protein, which is known to have high saturated fats, and then there's a limit for a recommendation for saturated fat, right? So, yeah.
People listening will probably be wondering how olive oil and essential fats don't align fully.
Yeah, so essential fatty acids, right, are basically, based on definitions, are those fatty acids that our bodies don't make themselves, which means that we need to get it from food. But, in reality, I think in America, most people are getting that from their food. And however, these essential fatty acids, such as linoleic acid, they're not particularly high at all in olive oil. So just saying that, olive oil has healthy fats, but they're not essential fatty acids.
Right. They're not the omega-3s, the omega-6s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, again, if I were reading this, I would not know at all. So you got your olive oil bottle on the food triangle. I was very happy for you. Let's start with what makes olive oil that healthy fat. And can you tell us about olive oil and what we should be looking for and what the heck virgin and extra virgin and all those terms are?
Yeah. So when we, in the US, I think when we're talking about healthy fat, especially for olive oil, I think consumers are thinking about extra virgin olive oil, which is basically you just take olives on the trees and you mash them up with the skin and then the pits and everything. So the whole fruit, it's a fruit oil, right? So you take the whole fruit and then you mash everything up into a paste, and then you mix the paste until the oil droplets start to coalesce, and then you put that in the centrifuge, and then the oil will come out. That's how you make extra virgin olive oil. So it's not that different from making fruit juice, right? So there's no chemicals, no heat. It's solely a mechanical process. So you basically just use machines to get the oil out of the fruit. And that's extra virgin. And of course, there's the chemistry criteria, there's the sensory criteria, there's processing criteria to make sure that this oil meets the extra virgin grade standard. It is the highest grade of all olive oil, right? But the reason for that is because there's no heat added in this process. So the antioxidants remain in the oil. Okay. So, but if the oil does not meet the extra virgin or virgin, so the difference between extra virgin and virgin is they are different grade. The virgin olive oil can have a little defect, even though it's processed the same way as extra virgin. You don't really see that in a U.S. supermarket. You don't see, you will see olive oil that's labeled as extra virgin olive oil, but you wouldn't see an oil that's labeled as virgin olive oil, because that basically means that it has some defect, right? No one would say no one would want to buy that if they knew, but I don't think people know that's the definition of virgin olive oil. But if the oil has a lot of defects, then you will take it to a refinery. And because during refining, you heat the oil up really high temperature, and that helps to remove all the unpleasant aroma flavor, but you also remove pigment, so the colors, right? So that's how you get refined oil. So if you look at, and then in the US, it's labeled as pure olive oil or extra light, which people think it's light in calorie, but it's not. They all have this exactly the same amount of calorie. Extra light olive oil. They're refined olive oil, and then you can tell the color difference. They tend to be lighter in color compared to extra virgin. That's because they have gone through the refining process. So the difference really is extra virgin and virgin. They're unrefined, and pure or extra light, they're refined olive oil, which is not that different from refined canola, soybean, vegetable oil in terms of their process, right? But we don't have a system where you put refined on the label, right? When you go to the store and you buy a bottle of canola or soybean, they're all refined. For the most part, sometimes you can find cold pressed canola oil, but it's not super common here in the US, but they have all got the same process.
Interesting. What are the defects? Like, are there bits and pieces or it tastes off or what's going on?
Yeah, it's usually have unpleasant aroma. Sometimes it's like, say, smell of wet socks or they could be like rancid. So like rancidity, stale, from oxidation. Wet socks, can come from fermentation. If someone harvests the fruit, right, and then the fruit sit in a pile for too long before it gets processed, and then fermentation can happen when the fruits are still in the bin after harvest. So then you get, unpleasant aroma, but it's mostly a quality issue, not really a food safety issue.
Interesting. Okay. And then if I were to guess, cooking with the refined olive oil would be better than cooking, like at high heat, would be better than cooking with extra virgin olive oil, but I don't know. So tell me if that's right or wrong.
Yeah, that's one of the hot topic in the olive oil world. Because a lot of the consumers and chefs believe that you cannot cook with extra virgin olive oil because people like to say it has low small point.
Yes.
That's not quite true because extra virgin olive oil, like we said earlier, it has the natural antioxidants, right? That are not removed by refining. So those antioxidants actually help during cooking. Because when you're cooking, oxidation happens, right? So these antioxidants can actually combat the oxidation during cooking. And then that prevents the oil from breaking down. Exactly. So it's not quite true that you can, extra virgin olive oil has a little small point. You can cook it with it. You totally can. So rest assured, you totally can cook with your extra virgin olive oil. And, you should.
Great. Okay. That's amazing because I am lazy and will only have like one oil at a time in my house and I'm doing everything with it. So that's great to know.
And that's a really important point. Sometimes people say like, okay, should I have a bottle of canola? Should I have a bottle of refined olive oil and a bottle of extra virgin olive oil? But in reality, all of these oils will go bad, right? They go bad even faster after you open it. And then if you, put it next to your stove, that gets hot when you cook or exposed to light, the oil is going to go bad, right? So it's probably the best if you have one bottle that you use it up fast before you move on to the next one.
I gotcha. Back to the refining part. You said it removes or it oxidizes the oil? Which one?
It removes the bad flavors, including
yeah. And it removes the antioxidants or it oxidizes the antioxidants?
It basically burns them off. Yeah. So
great. Okay. And is that the like scary language with seed oils?
I think it's the seed oil is a couple things. So first is that it's solvent extracted, right? So people worry about the solvent residue. That's one thing. And I also think people worry about the inflammatory from the omega-6 fatty acids. And, because people believe that there's the ratio of omega-3 and omega-6 is an important indicator for healthy oils, healthy fat. So I think those are a couple things. But, there's a good amount of data that shows that there's really little solvent residues left. So hexane is commonly used to extract. The boiling point of hexane is 69 degrees Celsius. During refining, the oil can heat up to as high as 230 degrees Celsius. The hexane has evaporated long before the refining finishes. So, Yeah, I mean, hexane has a very low boiling point, and then that's why they're used, right? Because it's easy to boil them off. So the hexane residue that's left in the oil, that's really not a concern. In fact, I think there's a greater chance of exposure from the environment, right? In particular, for people who work at those facilities, right?
Say more.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to concerns with pesticides, right? You know, yes, they're in our food, in our environment, but really it's those who work with them in the field, in the facilities that has a much, much greater risk. And those are the people we should be worried about, and probably not so much the little hexane residue that's in our oil.
And environmental exposure, including herbicides, pesticides, and anything else?
Yeah, all these things, because it's the dosage, right? So if you are encountering them every day, for years, and you know, for when people are working 8 hours a day, let's say, that is where you would see the negative health impact.
Yeah. Okay. Healthy fats seem to include saturated fats, and there was a explicit recommendation to have whole milk multiple times a day or whole fat dairy. So there still was the recommendation to get not more than 10% of your calories from saturated fat, but it didn't seem that way in the way people were talking about it and advertising the pyramid and saying that we should drink whole milk.
It will be hard to manage that, right? If you're drinking whole milk and eating red meat and then manage to get your 10% of your calories, likely to be greater, right? I mean, so your percentage of calories come from saturated fat is likely to be greater than 10%.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure someone can create a diet that you get to eat, follow that. But yeah, I think it's more likely that you will increase the calorie consumption in people if they do actually follow the dietary guideline. By the way, I don't know how many people are actually following the dietary guidelines, but if they do, I can see an increase in their calorie consumption.
Yeah.
And then they may not even know, right? Maybe the only swap they did is to change all the dairy to whole fat.
Yes. Okay. Can you speak to what the research says about saturated fat, even just on its own or in comparison to olive oil?
Yeah, I think one of the most consistent, decades of research shows that, a diet that's high in saturated fats increase the LDL, right? So where monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats decrease LDL. So that's been established for a long time.
Right. And LDL, the low density lipoprotein, we don't want it. Are you able to say more about that?
Yeah, no, exactly. We don't want that because that's one of the more reliable indicators for cardiovascular functions, right? So, and there's the HDL, which you want it to be high, but it's been shown that that's also very much related to genetics, so we can change that. But the LDL is an important, I'd say, indicator for vascular health.
Right. So that LDL floating around the body is more likely to stick to our artery walls and become calcified and hard, right? We don't want that. Yes. And it's not that we're eating LDL, because this is something that I hear with my patients a lot. Yeah, we're not eating the LDL, we're making it, and we're more likely to make it from saturated fat than unsaturated fat. Okay. Where does olive oil come into that conversation about cholesterol?
Cholesterol, yeah. So cholesterol is mostly in animal-based fats, right?
Yes.
So plants. So cholesterol is a type of phytosterol. So, and some of these are healthy, right? And we wanted to have them, these phytosterols, in our fats. But cholesterol is one it's gotten kind of mixed reviews. Remember the whole egg?
Yes.
It was good and then bad and then good.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it also just shows how difficult it is to do research in this area, right? Because there's so many confounding variables. How do you narrow it down to this one food or this one composition within a food that is driving the positive or negative health outcomes?
It's a really good point. In the healthy fats portion, it did say omega-3 rich seafood, nuts, seeds, dairy. Other options can include butter or beef tallow. What'd you think of that?
Well, so I don't know how much research is being done on tallow, but certainly in butter, right? There's been quite a study where they replace butter and then with other fats, and then, consistently that a group that consume less saturated fats, like butter, turn out had a better health outcomes, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's also a study, I think from Harvard, right, where they had olive oil, they have olive oil with nuts, and then they have butter. And the one that did the best, I think it was olive oil.
Not even olive oil with nuts?
I think that one did slightly worse, although you should definitely fact check me on this.
Okay, I'll look it up. And then the beef tallow, you mentioned that there's not a lot of, research on it. And when we're cooking with beef tallow, it's going to be refined, which is something that I don't think is communicated often. That one's refined to take out all the bits of it, or do you know anything about refining beef tallow?
Yeah, impurities, negative flavors, refining in general help the product to be more stable, right? Because anytime when you remove any undesirable, parts, you can have the product longer. And I think the beef tallow kind of catches on is, it has more flavor, right? That's similar to extra virgin olive oil. These oils have a little bit more flavor compared to refined oil, such as canola, soybean. And then I think some consumers like the flavors.
Yeah. Butter versus oil, for sure.
Yeah.
Did you hear RFK talk about ending the war on saturated fats? Did you hear him say that specifically?
No, I only heard about the protein. I didn't know we're having a war. I didn't know we're having a war on saturated fats or unsaturated fat.
Yeah, we're ending the war on saturated fat, and we're only getting 10% of our calories from saturated fat. I was like, these two things do not go together.
Yeah, and I think it's really difficult for a consumer, right? I mean, people don't know what is in this fat, right? I mean, I guess if you go to the store and then you start reading the nutritional label on the back, you can see how much. But when you go to the store, there's so many options.
Yes.
Where do you even start reading? You'd be standing there for like 20 minutes before you can even narrow it down. And even if you narrow it down to one category of the fat, so as you decide, okay, I'm going to go with olive oil, there's still all these different brands, then how do you decide? Right?
Yeah. And I'll say the first time I interviewed you, the most helpful thing you told me was to look at avocado and olive oil and then choose the cheaper one. Like whatever's on sale is what you said.
Yeah. And then bring it home and use it, right? Just keep one bottle and then, the oil will never get better. Any of the oils, any oil, refined, unrefined, none of the oils will get better. So you should buy it and then use it right away.
Wow. So then I probably shouldn't have one of those like open, like metal tips for cooking because that just allows air in and creates oxidation.
They're handy to use, right? When you're cooking and then you've got one hand. I think it's okay, but I would try to use the bottle sooner than later.
Oh, love a practical tip. Store oils in a cabinet, perhaps, and away from light.
Yeah, that's a good practice for sure.
I'm definitely not fancy enough to have one of those pour strips, let me tell you. I'm using like a gallon at a time like this. It's fine.
It's hard to pour out of those, big jug of oil. A lot of the restaurants, they use the bag box, similar to like a box wine. That's a really, really good packaging because, so the way it works is you have a bag, literally a bag in a box, and then have a dispenser, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't allow the air to get in anytime when you get oil out. So
or light,
right? So it's actually a very protective system for the oil. So bag-in-box is a really good packaging for any oil, and I would love to see if there's a future for this at a consumer, at a level, at a retail, because right now that's mostly being used in food service where they can go through a lot of those in one night, right, in one day. But I don't know if the consumers are ready to accept, maybe my oil can come in a box. But I do think that hopefully people can start recognizing that oil is a perishable product. It's not going to get better. It's also not going to last forever. So you should use it up after you bring it home.
Here's a question. I have coconut oil that I opened 15 years ago and it's still no, I'm just joking. It's been open for a very long time. Is it going to go rancid? Will it just take longer?
Yeah, if the oil that's full on saturated fats oxidize slower than unsaturated fats. So it's going to last longer.
Okay. And do you want to break down why the unsaturated versus saturated fats have different time oxidation periods? Yes.
I would love to. It comes down to the chemical structures. So saturated fats, it's a chain of carbons, but it doesn't have any double bonds. So it's all saturated. Versus unsaturated, there's double bonds, which means there's two lines between the carbons, and that makes them become more easily attacked by oxygen, or let's say not attack, react with oxygen. So they're more reactive under a condition where they are exposed to oxygen, right? So the more double bonds you have, the more reactive it is. So monounsaturated fats has one double bond. Polyunsaturated fats has multiple double bonds. So the more double bonds there is, the faster it reacts to oxygen.
I can explain it to like the more saturated fat, like they're able to stack on each other and not have that double bond in the middle. So like white butter is harder, coconut oil is harder. That's like my patient education.
They're solid in room temperature.
Yes, at room temperature. And yeah, why avocados are softer, why oils are liquid, stuff like that. Yeah. What a journey this is. Where do you see your research heading with this, with just what you've been doing for your tenure?
Maybe I'll just start doing research on tallow.
I would love that. Would you please do that?
I mean, I've been studying olive oil for a long time, and I will continue to do that. Yeah. But I do think there is, some interesting things that we haven't looked at, which is kind of compare olive oil, avocado oil, vegetable oil, tallow, in terms of what happens to them when you cook with them, right? And like compare them, and also kind of look into the real impact of processing. I think some consumers think food processing is a negative word, right? Forgetting that it's incredibly important for food safety, food accessibility, right? And actually, during oil refining, you remove some of the pesticides, quite a bit. So,
really?
There's good to this process. I mean, the people want like the big food, right? It's like the big pharma, right? But there's a lot of these processes are there to ensure public health safety and food safety, right? So I want to look into how these processings could potentially change the chemical compositions of the oil, right? And kind of do a direct comparison across the different oil categories. But we'll see. We'll see if I have funding for that. So I can dream about many projects, but
That's super interesting. Is that limited to oils, the refining, removing pesticides, or is that like many different types of crops and plants?
Yeah, so there's other things too. So refining also generates some compounds that are not desirable because of the high heat. So there are some compounds that we call them processing contaminants, right? So you want to keep those as low as possible. So, we're also going to be looking at some processing contaminants where pesticides, I would consider it more like a environmental contaminants, right? So kind of look at how different environmental components that could include PFAS, right? That could include forever chemicals, right? So phthalates, microplastics, these environmental contaminants, and along with processing contaminants, at the end, how much is that left in our food, right? And then make sure that we are communicate this in a way that is relevant to the consumer, and then because it's the dosage, right? The analytical instruments are so sensitive these days that we joke, if you look for it, you're going to find it. So the study that, I want to see what happens during refining, right? So the kind of looking to the different oil categories that people consume on a regular basis and look at the potential environmental and processing contaminants and what happens before and after processing. I think that would be interesting to see.
Nice. Dr. Selina Wang, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me, Jessica.
I look forward to having you back as the conversation about healthy fats continues to evolve.
I'm sure you will.
Thanks so much to Dr. Selina Wang for coming back on the show. As of this recording, Dr. Casey Means will have met with the Senate Help Committee as her path to Surgeon General is underway. We'll be back with that recap and much more on the next episode. Until next time, friends, eat some beef tallow and make it awkward. This has been Making It Awkward. I'm Jessica Wilson. You can find me on Instagram at jessicawilson.msrd. You can email the pod at makingitawkwardpod@gmail.com, and you can join the Patreon. The podcast is edited by Jen Jacobs, who corrected me on her favorite food that ends in Eatos, as discussed in the last episode. Her favorite Eatos food is actually Doritos. This is a production of The Body Politic and sponsored by the Legacy of Sacramento Outboard Services.